Hello friends, today we're taking a look at the ultimate jungle hunter predator from NECA. Now the back of the packaging for this guy says that he has an all-new body, with the emphasis being on his body, because the previously released jungle hunters did not have torso articulation. So yes, he literally has a new body, as in just the torso, because the head, the hands, the arms, and the legs all appear to be reused. But that's not a bad thing, because the overall sculpt is just NECA-rific. It is super accurate to the first Predator film. The lack of netting on the right arm, for example, is accurate. And all that netting is sculpted, not just painted on. There are these 3 strings dangling around his neck, where the Predator has all these little bones and skulls on display as trophies. And I guess the Predator has been spending his spare time killing small rodents?
This mouse was a fearsome adversary!
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Anyways, the sculpt on the skin, real leathery texture to it. Excellent job there. Great detail on the gauntlets, even if the panel on my left one is a little warped and pops up a bit. Moving down, he's got some armor for extra protection. Even the shin armor has a ton of sculpted holes and dents in it. The worst part of the sculpt has to be at the bottom, because each foot is just a blob on a paper-thin sandal. The only thing that's inaccurate, though, is that there are supposed to be tubes coming out of those ports on the Predator's biomask, and they're obviously not there. At first I thought this was a necessity for swapping the alternate heads, but then I remembered NECA put those tubes on their AVP Scar Predator, and they obviously would not have caused any issues. So what the heck. One last nitpick, the dreads on the back of the head are sculpted individually, but some of them are stuck together from paint, it seems. Thankfully you can just pull them apart, though. Speaking of that squishy paint, the helmet has this sort of grungy wash, or my figure is just actually grungy. The decals here and here seem a little out of place, but they are actually accurate to the battle damage the Predator has in the movie. Only this one's a lot more subtle in the movie, and this one probably should have been sculpted on. Honestly, it probably would have looked better if they'd just left them off instead of going with decals. The red lights and the targeting reticle are painted. They're not perfect, but it's so small and they didn't even have to bother, so that's a nice touch. Gold paint on the dreads is mostly good. Sometimes it's a little sloppy, and it's not even on the underside. But those are 2 things you're never even going to notice. Also not really noticeable is that most of the black paint on the torso doesn't match the sculpted lines for the netting, but like I said, you're never really going to notice. Predator should have some spots on the lighter parts of his flesh, but that would have been a nightmare for NECA to paint, so totally understandable that they're not there. The armor is this dull brown silver color I adore. It has a wash everywhere to bring out the sculpted details. It's a bit lighter on the thigh armor than the shins, but not too jarring. In fact, the wash on the shins is just absolutely outstanding. They even painted the countdown numbers on the inside of the gauntlet. They didn't have to do that. The hands and feet are both glossy, which doesn't really make sense for the gloves or the skin, since the rest of the leather and flesh on his body is matte. Also making no sense, his left glove is like a glove. It goes all the way around his hand, but if he were to close that hand, I guess that part would disappear because...
He's a witch!
I really don't know why the right glove's not painted on the other side. Only on the left are metal knuckles. The silver for them's a little sloppy but decent. The claws are painted black just fine on each hand. Same goes for the toes, except on the back, where the left dew claw thingy is huge and the right is tiny for some reason. Moving on to the loincloth, the back's not too bad. Notice how it's painted dark and fades away to lighter brown at the edges. Then we come to the front and it's just disappointingly plain by comparison. Except for the helmet decals, all of these are very minor nitpicks. The only other thing that bothers me is the thighs. If you'll notice, the Predator doesn't really have a skin pattern on the thighs. Instead, he just has 2 big white circles on each of them. And once you see it, it's really hard to unsee it. So overall, the paint could be a bit better, but it's not bad. The NECA effort is definitely there. Articulation's much better. Predator has a ball joint head, goes that far up, that far down, all the way around, excellent side to side. Shoulders are hinge and swivel, they can go that far up. The armor on the left is rubbery, so it doesn't get in the way. Each one can go all the way around, swivel at the biceps, double elbows, swivels at the tops of each gauntlet. The one on the right has movable blades, and the left has a hinged panel. The wrists are on ball joints, move them too far and they pop off. In fact, all kinds of things are popping off on the left arm. The torso has a ball at the diaphragm, gets a good bit of side to side, that much front and back, and swivels all the way around. Same type of joint at the waist, with even less side to side. Hips are on horizontal hinge balls. The loincloth and armor are rubber, so you can get about this much range, and maybe a little more if you want to squish it. The thighs are also swivels. Knees are double hinge. Ankles are just on ball joints. Overall, excellent articulation. I don't know what more they could have included. I'd like some hinges on the wrists and ankles, but otherwise, perfecto. Packaging was a standard NECA window box. Inside you get a picture of the jungle hunter revealing himself, in all his glory. And on the right, the actual figure being a bit more modest. If we pull the tray out, you can see the nice backdrop that's in there. Jungle green. And the Predator himself is held in with a twist tie around this wrist, that wrist, and a really twisty one around the waist. Once these are out, his feet come through the hole in the tray ridiculously easy, which is nice. And all the accessories are just held in with tape. Or at least there's tape in front of them. On the back of the box, we get a plot summary that reads more like a catalog of the Predator's accessories. Plasma caster, wrist blades, cloaking technology, skulls, spines, and a bunch of cool photos. And at the very bottom in fine print, an actual catalog of accessories. 2 interchangeable heads, 2 pairs of hands, human skull, skull and spine, cannon blast effect, removable backpack, opening gauntlet, and mask. The gauntlet isn't really an accessory since it isn't removable, but these boner necklaces are, so you could count them if you want. His alternate right hand is also missing the glove on the palm. Maybe that's just how his right glove was in the movie? Did the Predator have a Michael Jackson thing going on with non-matching gloves? I don't know. Accurate to the film or not. Either way, it's weird. The left ones switch out easy enough and have a satisfying click when you pop them on. That's perfect. But the right one is ridiculously hard. And then when you're trying desperately to pop a right hand on, you're going to stab yourself with these things. Ow! The skull's nice. Good sculpt. Cool paint wash. He can hold it. The skull with the spine is nice. Good sculpt. Cool paint wash. He can hold it. Now the backpack. Backpack? It's called a plasma caster. I don't know why it's called a backpack on the box. It has the same bronzy looking color as the Predator's armor. To get it on, you want to hook this thing in the little hole here first, then just kind of slide the top peg into this hole, which actually blends really well with the sculpt there. It seems like it's going to be a little mushy at first, but when it's on there right, it's super firm in place. Nice! The whole thing matches his shoulder really well. The cannon's even articulated with little hinge down here and ball joint up there. Too bad the hinge on the bottom feels too loosey-goosey on mine. The blast effect looks so much better than the one from the accessory pack. It's less frosted, so it won't look like ice. And I can tell they even painted it blue in the middle, even though the thing's already cast in translucent blue. Unfortunately, getting it to stick in the cannon is only barely better than that one was. It only fits around the cannon's lip if you rotate it a certain way, and then the little ball at the end of it is supposed to pop in there, but it just feels like you're mushing and bending the peg to me. Once it's in there, though, it usually falls down from the added weight on that weak hinge from earlier. Still, looks better and fits slightly more snugly. I guess it's an improvement. And now for the last accessory. The unmasked head. And the mask. The dreads on the alternate head aren't painted on the underside, just like the normal one, and he should have a bunch of spines on his brow, but I guess that would have been hard to pull off at this scale, so instead NECA just tried to suggest them on these ridges here that are kind of hard to see. The head pops off easily enough, but putting one on is so mushy feeling it's hard to tell when it's actually on. It would have been nice to get a roaring head, but the sculpt of the mandibles closed is still excellent. Predator can't actually wear the mask, or bio-helmet as it's sometimes called, even though it's totally mask and not a helmet. Not that you need him to, since he has the 2 heads, but that's actually interesting because it's also exactly how they did it in the movie. 2 different suit heads for when the Predator's masked and unmasked, and a prop mask for when he took it off. See how accurate NECA is to the source material? What's not accurate is this being red. The targeting laser wouldn't be on when the mask is off his face. It makes no sense and is one instance where I'd have been happier if a company actually left some paint apps off. That said, it's still the coolest accessory, even if all the Predator can really do is hold it, and these have all been great inclusions. For scale and comparison, the Jungle Hunter stands at 8 inches, or 20.5 centimeters tall. Here he is next to a Marvel Legend, DC Universe Classics, NECA's City Hunter, AVP Scar Predator, Battle Armor Lost Predator, Thermal Vision Dutch, a Xenomorph Warrior, and a Mickey Mouse figure. What? Ultimately, friends, this is a pretty typical NECA Ultimate figure, which is to say, it's amazing! The sculpt is top-notch, even with things like the cables coming out. I feel like that's something that had to be done to work with the articulation, and I much prefer it to them breaking off. The articulation is pretty much NECA plus a diaphragm joint, so that's great. Even though the paint's really super, that's probably the area where there's the most room for improvement. Just do a better skin pattern on the thighs, and don't let the decals on the mask stick out so much. 2 heads would have been awesome enough, but NECA went the extra mile and gave us a ton of accessories. I only wish that some of them popped on better, either being too mushy or too hard. But But overall, it's an awesome Jungle Hunter figure and one that's pretty easy to find. So go out and pick one up. Until next time, peace out, YouTube!